Welcome to the Training Ground Guru podcast in association with Teamwork's Intelligence. In every episode, we bring you insights into the teams behind the teams in professional football. Coming up on today's episode.
You know, he's a manager that's had success in multiple countries, and I don't think there's many that have done that. Yeah, and he's proven he can manage in the highest league in the world, which is the Premier League. He's a European Cup winner, you know, as a manager in his second season. He never wavered in his belief, and to come out and say it publicly and back it up, I mean, that's probably going to be the biggest mic drop of all time, no doubt in many, many years to come.
I'm Simon Austin from Training Ground Guru, and our guest on this episode is Nick Montgomery. Nick has just been installed as the assistant to Ange Postecoglou at Nottingham Forest after the duo worked together at Tottenham last season. It's important to note that our chat was a day before those appointments were made, but Nick told me what it's like to work with Postecoglou, about their struggles and triumphs last season, and why some of the narratives about the Australian are simply incorrect. He also told me about his own career in the game, as a player, coach and manager in his own right. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please give us a follow via your preferred podcast provider. Thanks very much for joining us on the podcast, Nick.
My pleasure.
So, you left Tottenham in the summer after a very famous win in the final of the Europa League. What have you been doing since then?
So to be honest, Simon, it's the first time I've been out of work since leaving school at 16 and joining Sheffield United as an apprentice. So it's been a little bit strange, but I think the timing of leaving Tottenham, which was sort of late into the off season, and then we had the Club World Cup, and it's been a time to sort of reflect really on a long playing career and sort of my start into coaching, which has gone on for probably the last 6-7 years. And then just really watching football and spending a little bit of time with the family, which I think is really important, because probably the first time I've not been in a pre-season since I was 16. So yeah, it's a bit strange, but also quite valuable in terms of just spending a bit of time and continuing to educate myself and hopefully prepare for the next opportunity.
And it's very, very unusual to have a big high and a big trophy win like that, and then lose your job afterwards. So what was that like? Yeah, again,
when you look back on the season, obviously I'd sort of moved from Australia where I had a lot of success, moved to Scotland, took a Hibs team from bottom of the league, when I took over, and really proud of what I achieved there, but leaving there and going to Tottenham, and a bit of a crazy season, crazy amount of injuries throughout the season, and sort of some real highs and lows as well. Some amazing results, throughout the season, but also a real difficult period where we sort of struggled in terms of that real bad sort of injury crisis. But I think in the end, it was an amazing experience, because I think one thing we did is we sort of kept everybody together, and we achieved something that many had not achieved, and that was to win a trophy at Tottenham, but not only a trophy, a European trophy where. At the end of it comes Champions League football, comes Super Cup football. Obviously, a huge amount of money for the club to invest, sort of moving forward. And you're sort of looking forward to the next season and hopefully building on that. And then, obviously football changes. It's just the way football is now. And the club made a decision and sort of moved on the manager and some of the staff. And then you sort of find yourself, from the high of winning the Europa League, which is a huge achievement, to out of a job and looking forward to the future. It was a sort of bittersweet moment, but one, like I said, has given me a little bit of time to reflect on sort of achievements over the last couple of years since I got into coaching and managing, and really proud of what I've achieved. So it's definitely a little bit of time now to sort of reflect and really look at what the next step is.
Were you able to sort of celebrate with abandon, or did you always have that feeling that it could be the end at that time?
No, look, we all celebrated, and it was like a big family. I think when you go through the adversities that we went through that season, obviously, like I keep mentioning, and the multiple injuries that we had, and periods where we had a lot of young players that that had to play week in, week out, and we were talking a Premier League, League Cup, Europa League. So I mean, look, it was amazing. It was 100 mile an hour, hands on. You know, each week was action packed and lots going on. But yeah, in the end, you know, you're going to always celebrate a historic win. And for a lot of players, some it was the first trophy that they'd won in their careers, and some had obviously won before. But I think it made it quite special because the circumstances and sort of pressure that everybody was under. So it was, I think the environment that we had was a real family environment, everybody together. And in the end, when you go through what you have done as a group, you know, and as a collective staff as well, and you achieve something monumental like that, it was a massive celebration. And to see the fans, I mean, the trophy parade was something else. It was, obviously you saw it online. I've been fortunate to have a few trophy celebrations and open top buses, but I mean, when you see 250,000 fans around the stadium just celebrating and swinging off lampposts and standing on top of houses and Portaloo toilets that were caving in when we arrived back at the stadium, and just to see the players, after such a difficult season, to be celebrating such a huge achievement. That was definitely a good week of celebrations, and one that you always sort of treasure as a player and a coach being involved in something like that.
And we talk a lot about tactics and game methodologies and things like that, but it can be as simple as just keeping your best players fit, can't it? And I think the final showed that again.
Yeah, look, you know, there's always a quote that I believe in, and you know, your best ability is availability, and you know, if you can have your best players fit and available throughout the whole season, it's going to give you the best chance of succeeding. So I think the timing of us getting players back towards the end of the season meant we sort of, what I've spoken about before, and so as Ange, you know, we sort of had to sort of sacrifice in terms of the league. And really try to keep everybody as fit and healthy as we could going into that Europa League latter stages, and there's some real difficult games, you know, away at Frankfurt, away at Bordeaux Glimt, which is, you know, in the other side of the world, a real difficult place to go on a synthetic pitch. So I think everything that we had to deal with, we sort of had to stick together and, you know, to get through what we did, and you know, for Ange to manage it the way he did, was something I learned a lot from, because I think a lot of people did doubt, that we could do it, and I think that sort of drove on the players as well, because I think everybody was so together after all the challenges that we'd faced. It was, we all believed we could win the Europa League, and to finally lift that trophy, and you know, not just for the players, but for the staff, for the fans, for the club in general, because for many years it'd been easy for people to target, Tottenham as never winning a trophy, and to sort of break that, and then obviously you have Ange that came with the famous quote that, you know, he always wins in his second season. So I think from that moment, there was a lot of pressure, and I think a lot of people didn't want us to achieve that. But I think that's a measure of him as a manager, and to assist him throughout the season, was a real honour for me.
And have you got any idea why the injuries were so bad last season, looking back?
Look, it's hard. A lot of players now, they play a lot of games, and I think, you know, the pre-season was, I think most Premier League clubs, you know, go through a lot of disruption with players on international duties, whether it's the Euros, World Cups, Copa Americas, and a lot of players sort of came back late into pre-season, and you know, the Premier League's unforgiving. You know, that you start the season, you have the Premier League games, you know, the League Cup games, and then obviously Europa League starts. So, you know, we're obviously just unlucky. But again, you know, you can never really, you know, understand why, you know, you have so many injuries, but I think we're very unlucky. There's definitely an element of luck and keeping your players fit and available, and we probably didn't have the biggest squad either. So I think when you couple all that together, it's a relentless league, the Premier League, and when you throw all the other cups in, and I think a lot of clubs struggled over the years, and you know, when the Europa League was sort of thrown in, and Champions League, and you don't have a huge squad, you know, you're always going to be, you know, crossing your fingers that you can keep everybody fit and available, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. But I think out of every negative situation, you have to look at the young players like Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall, you know, two young players that were signed that, you know, maybe weren't signed to start games, and I think they played 50 odd games each last season. So I think, you know, working with a lot of young players over my career and developing a lot of young players, I think, you know, the only way to really accelerate the development is to play them. And at times you're going to suffer because, you know, the biggest consistency with young players is they're going to make mistakes. But it's where you have to stick with them, and obviously they learn from their mistakes and learn from that experience. So I think in the long run, I mean, you're talking two fantastic young players there. There was many more that played a lot of games last season. They've really benefited in both of them. It's obviously starting games this season as well. So yeah, I always believe out of the tough situations, there's always positives to take, and the young players playing a lot of games, plus some academy boys coming in during the season and having to play. And that's something that always, as a club, you're always proud of, bringing academy players through and giving them appearances as well.
Yeah, and he's a good Leeds lad like yourself, Archie Gray. You got that in common?
Yes, I played with Archie's dad, Andy, for many years. So sort of when I joined the club and sort of Archie came in, he's a great kid, unbelievable attitude, and the same as Lucas Bergvall. And then Brennan Johnson, I played with his dad as well. So yeah, there was definitely a few connections there, and made me feel pretty old, but look, amazing to be working with top class Premier League players and internationals. And I think when you're working at that level, to see the young players now that are really pushing on, and it's definitely a lot younger game now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So it's definitely seen that change.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it has become younger?
I just think it's, the amount of running that you have to do now. You're talking the Premier League. I mean, if you look at the stats, the number of high intensity sprints, distance covered, it's a massive athletic. You have to have a big capability to play at the highest level. And I think, the young players, they're coming in now, and the demands on them are really high. And I think if you continue that for a long period, then it's obviously going to pick up injuries, and as you get older, it becomes more difficult. So, and again, the value, when you're putting value into players, you want to put the value in at a young age, put them on long contracts, so that whether you're a selling club or buying club, you're going to be looking to look after your investments and put them on long-term contracts. And that's one thing that you can do with the young players. And I think you've seen, the huge sums of money now that players are going for around the world, especially in the Premier League. It's definitely changed over the years.
And are they two, Bergvall and Archie Gray, that could really go to the top level, do you think, be big value players in the future?
Yeah, I think they're two of many. There's a lot of young players now around the Premier League that are coming in, but I mean, obviously Archie is an English player coming from Leeds, and Lucas coming from Sweden. But I mean, to work with them two players, I think people always ask what's the biggest difference, and for me it's always the mindset. It's always the belief, and obviously the ability is one thing, but attitude, attitude has to be spot on every day. And you look at them two, and you're always in the gym, always doing the extras, whether it's training, you have to pull them off the training ground. And I think looking at both of them two last season, playing 50 odd games each, and winning the Europa League in the first season of sort of Premier League football, it's an amazing start for them, and hopefully they continue to progress. And for sure, the acceleration of their development is playing physical games week in, week out, because that's the best way of gaining experience. And already now they're experienced Premier League players, and they're still 18, 19 years old. So they've definitely got big futures ahead of them.
Where do you see Archie ending up eventually? Do you think he's a midfielder, central midfielder?
Yeah, I think Archie's always been a midfielder, but I think his problem is he's such an honest player that he will play in any position, he will play anywhere to play in the team. But obviously coming from Leeds when he came, obviously he played a lot of full back, sort of rotating inside as a midfielder, and obviously at Tottenham as well he played at centre back at quite a lot of the season because we had so many injuries. So to think most of the season, a big part of the season, Archie was playing left centre back. He's right footed. He's playing left centre back in the Premier League against the best players in the world, and he's a midfielder coming in his first season. But he just got on with it. Like I said, his attitude was amazing, and to see him progress and work with him, last season was again, knowing his dad and knowing his family, it was really special. And keep in touch with Archie and Lucas and the young boys, and you sort of, I think when you win something as monumental as we did, I think it's always going to create them relationships. No matter where you are in the future, you're always going to be able to use that moment where you remember winning a European trophy. And I'm sure for them, they will treasure that moment for the rest of their careers.
It's always great to speak to someone like yourself, Nick, because you've been there behind the scenes and we can find out a bit of the truth. Because I feel there were quite a few narratives about the way that Ange did things. So one was people saying he doesn't practice set pieces. But I believe that was actually a big part of your responsibility, was to look after the set pieces.
Look, I think set pieces now in the game are a huge part of it. The set piece coaches around the world, a lot of clubs do have them now. And I think, again, you talk about a narrative there. Ange, he never said he didn't do set pieces. Obviously I wasn't there the season before, but coming in, I'm not a specific set piece coach. I came in as an assistant, and he sort of asked me and Millie Jedinak to sort of look after the set pieces, and that was something that I enjoyed. I think it's a big part of the game, but obviously the clubs now, you have the analyst and the football analyst, the set piece analyst. So again, a lot of the data is there for you. You can see a lot of the teams now in terms of the strategies from set pieces. So I think really for us it was big improvement on the season before. I think it was 35% less goals conceded, and there's quite a high percentage. We were second from scoring, second to Arsenal from scoring direct from corners. And everybody realises how good Arsenal are. And I think for us and for me, sort of working with a lot of the young players that probably weren't used to being involved in set pieces of that magnitude. And you're teaching Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall. Obviously it's a contact sport, and I think now you can see a lot of the set pieces and corners. There is a lot of contact. It's really hard for the referees. I think if they stopped every corner and looked at VAR, they could probably not give the goals or give fouls. But look, it's part of the game. You have to adapt. We went a big part of the season where we didn't have Mickey van der Veen, we didn't have Christian Romero, we didn't have Richarlison, and you're talking some of your biggest, not only defending set pieces but attacking set piece specialists. So we're asking Archie Gray and Wilson Odobert, who's not the tallest, and attacking players. They're having to do jobs and again against some of the most physical players, not in Premier League, probably in world football. So it was a real task, but something that we sort of collaborated with the rest of the coaching staff as well, and obviously delivering the sessions. That was part of what myself and Millie Jedinak delivered, and we did work on them quite a bit. So again, you talk about narratives. I think in the media there's always narratives, and I think if you look at the stats over the season, we were very strong on both attacking and defending when you put it into context, and you look at the team that we had available, and the height and physicality of the players that we had missing, and again that's something that people don't put in context, but they're facts. So it was a real challenge, but definitely seen a lot of growth, a lot of confidence in the young players coming in and being able to handle that, not only in the Premier League, in Europa, in Europe, and going into that final as well. So it was really important that we kept a clean sheet in the final when you got Harry Maguire, who's one of the best set piece attackers and defenders probably in the Premier League. So when you look back on it, sort of the whole season, it was a real learning opportunity for a lot of the young players.
So you were actually second to Arsenal in the Premier League for goals scored from set pieces?
From direct, yeah. So when the ball was delivered in direct and that resulted to a goal, so we were second to Arsenal, which I think, again, people would have to dive into the stats, but it's something that, again, we're really proud of, considering we also didn't really have a specific set piece taker. And obviously Pedro Porro is a fantastic technician, but asking your right full back to then go on the left side to put in swinging crosses in, for example, and then the transitions that happen in the Premier League, then you've got your full back out of position. So you have to look at all these different scenarios, and we did work a lot with some of the players that possibly weren't set piece takers, and Sonny was one of them. I think Sonny scored a couple of direct corners. If you remember, against Man United, put in quite a few balls, and so did Maddison, and then obviously you get an assist from that as well. So it was about really, sort of pushing the players to work on the delivery and then obviously the blocking and the timing and the attacking of the run. So it's very complex, and you can see that with some of the teams that spend a lot of time on the set pieces.
So when you say direct, do you mean from the first phase then?
Yeah, I just mean first contact from the delivery.
And how did you divvy it up with yourself and Millie then? Would one of you take attacking and one of you take defending?
Yeah, so we it was collaborative, not just myself and Millie, but with Ryan Mason and obviously Sergio Raimondo and Matt Wells. So we obviously discuss it, and then in the end, we in terms of delivering it, you're talking at times 20-odd, 25, 30 players, and I think what's really important, I think when you're delivering the set pieces, is that everybody's not standing around. So we created some drills where everybody was active. We had balls coming in from both sides in terms of attacking, but also defending. It's about understanding what the opposition are going to do. Setting up as the opposition, and also giving them the information that this is what is going to happen. Always it's down to the delivery. It doesn't matter how you set up if you don't get the delivery right. And that's something that, again, a lot of teams work on the delivery, and it's a repetition of the same run, the same delivery, and blocking certain players. And then you have players that are strong at heading, players that are strong at blocking, and players that are good at delivering the ball. So really, it's working on everybody's strengths. And in the end, it's more about repetition, so that when you come into the game, it becomes natural under pressure. You can deliver the ball in the area that you want, whether it's a signal, and you have players that are going to be diligent. And I think it's about discipline, because no matter what, if you go to deliver the ball into an area, and you've worked on blocking a certain strong defender from clearing the ball, and that player doesn't do his job, then obviously it doesn't matter how you deliver the ball. It can be perfect. If it gets cleared, then obviously it's failed in terms of what you worked on. So it's really about the players being disciplined, and everybody fulfilling their role and responsibility, and that's real key on any set piece.
I feel that a lot of clubs now have the dedicated set-piece coach, don't they? The specialist, and they will call them the set-piece coach. So like Nicholas Jover at Arsenal. But then you will get a lot of assistants who also do the job, won't you? Like Kevin Nolan, I remember at West Ham. And they were one of the best teams on set-pieces under David Moyes. But I think a lot of fans think if you haven't got that dedicated set-piece coach, you haven't got one. But that's not the case, is it, as you showed?
Oh, look, I think, you obviously analyse every set piece, so you have the analysts that will analyse that, and ultimately, when you're delivering the set piece, you have to set it up, and you have to have the ability to deliver. And there is some set piece coaches that I've heard of that they just come up with a strategy. They don't actually have the ability to deliver that session. And again, look, it depends, but I think you see these sort of trends coming in football, in the Premier League and Championship and around the world, and someone gets a set piece coach specific, somebody else does, but it doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's right. And I think ultimately it's about the bunch of players that you have, and having somebody that can put that strategy in place. But look, some clubs do, some clubs don't, and I think there's a lot of coaches that have played a lot of football, like myself and Mile Jedinak. We both played a lot of games, in the Premier League, in the Championship. You're talking, thousands of games between us. So I think from that experience, and you can also pass that on to the players, and with it being a contact sport, to have been in and around set pieces as a player, to then be able to go in and obviously try and teach people how to defend properly, how to attack, I think it definitely does give you that ability to convince them this is what you need to do. But ultimately it's always going to be down to the player. On that moment, can he deliver it? Can he deliver what you've worked on in the week? Because there's a lot of fans, there's a lot of pressure, and I suppose you can see a lot of teams now do a lot of work on it. So it's a big part of the game. I think 30-35% of all goals scored in football across the board are from set pieces. So not only defending, but also attacking wise, it's a huge part of the game.
100%. And had you coached set pieces before? That was a fundamental part of your job in Australia, was it, with the Mariners?
No, not really. So it's not something that I'd done personally before, but obviously I'd had coaches I'd managed overseas and in Scotland. And I think, when you have a group of coaching staff, it's about sort of collaborating. And I think when you're taking a lot of the session, sometimes it's good to have a different voice and somebody else to specifically work on that, because it is quite a complex part of the game. But no, it's not something that I'd sort of spent a lot of time on, but in terms of speaking to Mile and speaking to the other coaches on how best are we going to sort of attack this. And again, like I said, if you put it into context, we had a lot of our main headers missing for large parts of the season. So I mean, there are some clubs that completely rely on set pieces. That's a big part of their playing style, methodology, and obviously they sort of recruit for that as well, and they're really hard to sort of play against. So number one, you have to avoid giving set pieces away, but you have to be obviously very disciplined defensively as well, because that's going to be a big threat for them. But like I say, it's just part of the game. You have the different phases of the game, and set pieces are definitely a big part of it.
And that was another big narrative, wasn't it? Was about the methodology and style of play, and people saying that it was very, very fixed and not adaptable. So thinking with a very high line, playing out short from the goalkeeper. high possession, things. And the final was very different to that. But is that a fair narrative, do you think?
Not really. I think, it's everyone's going to have their opinions. And as I said, and I've said this before when I was asked, to be put into context, you're talking huge injury list. You're talking players that are playing week in, week out, 3 games a week. Unbelievable high intensity in terms of the league itself, the Premier League. And then you're going into Europe, you're playing cup games. We got to the semi-final of the cup. We beat Liverpool, lost away in the second leg to the best team in England, in one of the best club teams in the world, with an unbelievable squad. And I think going into that second leg, I remember they had one injury concern, and that was Trent Alexander-Arnold. And I think at that point, we'd literally just brought in Kevin Danso on loan, Mattis Tell on loan, and they both started the game because we really didn't have a lot of players available. So I think when you put it into context, I think the way that we played, when we had everybody fit, we had some unbelievable results, beating Man City away 4-0 start of the season, United away 3-0. And ultimately, I think, we had a lot of players missing, and it became really difficult for the players to back up. You're not talking week after week, you're talking every 48 hours. At times we'd arrive back from Europe at 4 a.m, and 48 hours later we'd have a game, and sometimes had to travel again. So look, it just became really difficult, and a lot of football now. There's a lot of teams that build up from the back. There's a lot of teams that play a high line, and when you get it right, it's people say it's modern football. Everyone's got their own opinions on formations, on styles of play, but ultimately at this level you have to have a big squad of players fit and available. You have to be able to rotate. And you look at Chelsea last season, and I think everybody, when Chelsea was signing all them players, a lot of people were saying it's overkill, they're signing way too many players. Obviously, to manage that's going to be difficult, but I think when you look at the amount of players they had, and as the season went on, they got stronger. They were, in Europe, they were rotating the whole team. Midweek the whole team was 10, 11 changes, and then you go into the Premier League with 10, 11 fit players, and ultimately that pushed them on towards the end. And even the Club World Cup, you could see the amount of players that they had. For them to go on and win the World Cup was an unbelievable achievement. But I think people, really look at the amount of players they signed, the amount of money they spent. But ultimately, you could see that, the way football is going with the amount of games, and then you throw in the international games on top of that. You have to have a big squad nowadays, and I think that played a huge part in them succeeding in that Club World Cup.
I saw a very good clip actually with Thomas Frank. I think it was on Monday Night Football, but he was talking about the difference between, I think, principles and tactics. So he was saying that his formation could change depending on the opponent, but he has certain principles that he always sticks by. So I was like, what do you think about that as a coach and a manager yourself?
Look, I think people talk about philosophy and methodology, and I think they're difficult things to explain. I think philosophy, part of that is the environment that you create. Ultimately you have to create a learning environment where players want to come every day, they want to train, they want to get better. And then I think the principle-based stuff is, principle-based learning, means that no matter what formation you play, who plays, your principles are always going to stay the same. And like you mentioned, then a lot of coaches, sort of do work on principle-based. And I think, for me, that's how I look at football as well. It's definitely based on principles, and the same as Ange. And you look at the success that Ange has had. He's won trophies every country he's been in, and sort of to get to work with him, for me, was a great opportunity to learn and work in the Premier League and work with World Cup winners, and to go on, like you say, to achieve what we did. A lot of it was principle based, and like I said, everyone has this philosophy. It's a word that gets used a lot, but I think in the end, you're gonna, your players are gonna dictate how you get through the season. But I mean, that's where you have to keep everybody as fit as you can and have the ability to rotate, because it's difficult otherwise.
Teamwork's intelligence gives clubs an edge that can enable smarter decisions faster. When most teams are drowning in data and not getting nearly enough out of it, Teamwork's intelligence can clear the way. Built by a powerhouse team of sports data scientists, engineers, and football data experts who have been shaping this industry for over a decade, we understand the challenges teams face. With data now at the forefront of scouting, recruitment, and team analysis, Teamwork's Intelligence has built a platform that turns billions of data points into precise models, predictive metrics, and insights that actually make a difference to a club's performance, both on and off the field. Ready to level up? Head to teamworks.com to learn more.
I always associate you with Sheffield United, where you spent the major chunk of your career. So was a fair bit of that under Neil Warnock, thinking back?
Yeah, so Neil gave me my debut in 2000, so I spent, I think, about 7 years with Neil Warnock, and yeah, colourful character, and yeah, some great memories. And yeah, we were a team that were sort of the underdog, but if you look at the achievements that we made, the promotions to the Premier League, the playoff finals, the cup runs that we had, knocking off some of the big teams from the Premier League back in the day, and ultimately, I think, the club found that again under Chris Wilder, and I think that promotion back to the Premier League and sort of see him yo-yo a little bit the last couple of years. But I spent a big part of my career there, 15 years of my career in Sheffield, and it's a great club and a real working class club, fantastic fans, and to see how they've sort of gone over the years is hopefully they can get back to the Premier League.
And Neil Warnock was unbelievable, wasn't he, at the personal relationship piece with the players and building that team spirit. Often quite unconventional the way he did it, from what I hear, but sounds like he was very, very good at that.
Yeah, I still speak to Neil now. I mean, look, he contacts me and every now and then, and yeah, I think what you said then, look, he's man management. People talk about man management, and I think that's something that's really difficult to teach. I think you have to be in and around it. And you have to understand football is a people's game. It's about the people involved in it. The players are human beings. So I think if you forget that side of it, the one side of it is the football, is the tactics, is the principles, is the philosophy. The other side of it is you're talking human beings. And if you look at the shift in the last sort of 10, 20 years in terms of the generations, the generation now are very different than the generation when I brought through, for example, in 2000, which is 25 years ago. But again, then it was a lot more disciplined. It was a lot more, structured. Whereas now, you're talking players, young players now are earning huge amounts of money, and they've come through a totally different generation where it's a lot about social media. So again, you have to be conscious of all these things. And I think, understanding people as humans. And I suppose Neil, what he did was, he treated everybody differently. People say you should treat everybody the same. Some coaches, back in the day, everyone gets treated the same, but he was very much, treat everybody differently. And I always sort of remember the older players that we had. Some of them lived in London. The families were in London, for example, and we'd win a game on a Saturday, and he'd say, "I'd see you on Wednesday," for example. And I think as a young player, I even understood then, because I wanted to train every single day. I didn't have a family. But when you talk about taking people away from the families and just being able to give them, 24, 48 hours at home with the families that are maybe going to school down in London and are spending the rest of the week in Sheffield, I think the amount of respect that he got from that. And look, again, training was very different 20 years ago, 25 years ago than it is now. So was all the recovery and stuff. But I think, he definitely sort of understood people and how to manage people, and how to create an environment, because in the end, if you want to win stuff and be successful, then you have to create a good environment that people want to come in and work. And ultimately, if it's not working, you have to move them people on, because it only takes one or two that are not happy, that you keep them around. And I think Neil was very good at moving players on if they didn't fit the club and they didn't fit the way we wanted to play. He wouldn't just leave them. Training with the reserves, for example, he'd move them on quite quickly. He'd help them move on, and I think people respected that. And there's been many stories over the past, and I've been involved where you see players probably not been treated properly, but in the end they're friends with the players that you need every week in, week out. So it's all about having that culture and having that good environment. So I mean, I've been fortunate to work with some really good managers and coaches through the years, and I think that's what really moulds you as a person, as an individual. Some good stuff, some not so good stuff, and for sure that's how you grow as a person.
Was it a bit more macho when you were coming through, would you say, if that's the right word, that it would be more aggressive, command and control, shouting, all that type of thing? Yeah,
I think, look, it's well documented, sort of the mental health side of it, and unfortunately, without naming, I know a lot of players that I played with that have really gone on and struggled post-football, some of them down to bad financial advice, throughout their careers, and some just down to sort of being institutionalised for so long. And, for sure, it used to be, very aggressive compared to what it is now. And I remember that shift from going from an apprentice where you used to clean the boots, you used to get shoved in the boot room, polish all over you. That then became bullying, a few years later. Players didn't have to clean boots anymore. That sort of stuff wasn't accepted. And look, some of it was completely wrong, but some of it was, was part of sort of growing up. And, I still believe the cleaning the professionals' boots. I don't understand why that ever got stopped, because I think that's something I enjoy doing, to give you the contact with the first team players that you're aspiring to, and it give you that sense of discipline, and in the end, the boots are what the player's going to go out in, make sure they're clean. And I used to do that for 3 or 4 players' boots. And then obviously when I got in the first team, I was fortunate I had a couple of kids that cleaned my boots, and at Christmas you'd give them a little tip and stuff, and then that stuff got stopped. So again, you can see the big shift there. But ultimately, I think then sports psychology came in. I'm a big believer in sports psychology. I think it's great to have the tools for the young players and the older players now, because the pressures are so huge with the social media, which really is, a lot of it is online bullying. It's so easy to access players, so that the one side of it is is really good for the players, but one side of it is really difficult. And in the end, you're dealing with human beings, and I've seen it. Many players that I've worked with, you look at Brennan Johnson last season, it was well documented. He came off Instagram, and look at the amount of goals he scored. He scored the winning goal in the European Cup final, and you're talking a fantastic young human being that's just wanting to do his best. And he was strong enough to come off social media and just clean that from his daily life, and you could see the benefit from that. So look, I've seen many cases where some players are not affected, but a lot of players are, and in the end, I think you have to deal with them players now. And going back to dealing with a lot of young players that I've helped develop, that have now gone on to play international, that have gone on to play top levels around the world, and a big part of that was sort of working with them, understanding what they're going through, and giving them the support. And I think the PFA now, for example, there's huge amounts of support for mental health, and it's going to continue going on that trend, and it's really important.
I feel that life in general, but football in particular, has become so short term. So fans, they have such a strong reaction to a result, don't they? And I remember even I was reading, after a bad performance, I think a fan had come on and said Forest getting that money for Brennan Johnson is the best bit of business ever for a club, And I thought, come back to that in a couple of years and let's see where we are, But that kind of is symptomatic of that very short-term nature of football.
Yeah, and look, it's always a minority, and unfortunately, I mean, you're looking at psychology, there can be 20,000 good comments, but the 2 bad comments are the ones that your brain will trigger, and the ones that you'll see, and they will create an emotion, a negative emotion. So I can say I've been fortunate. I've worked with some really good sports psychologists, and again, a big part of them is sort of creating a team environment where everybody feels safe. And I think it has to be a safe space. You have to put that support around them. But yeah, I mean, it's so easy for fans of opposition teams to access the players of their rival teams and showering negative comments. And in the end, yeah, it's easy to say don't listen to it, don't look at it. But I think a lot of players are addicted to the phones. Straight after games now they're on the phones, and you can see that. Whereas, I mean, when I started off, there was no phones to be seen in the dressing room, and you'd go home after the game, you'd be disappointed maybe you didn't play well. But I think now you only have to have one bad performance, and the negative comments around it are they're damaging. But it's a part of football, so you have to deal with it. You have to put platforms and support in place to protect the players from that, because it's part of modern society.
And looking back to your own career, you made that move to Australia 2012 with Central Coast Mariners. So I don't know if you had a family at that time, but that's a pretty massive move to go right to the other side of the world at that age.
Yeah, look, I got to 31. I just had the twins were born premature, so I went for a really difficult, probably 6 months, and I always wanted to play overseas. I think after playing 15 years at one club, 400 games, at Sheffield United, I felt I really want to take an opportunity and go and play abroad. So there was a link with the club and the Central Coast in the A-League, and it sort of happened quite quickly. Went over there and really enjoyed my time living out there. Great lifestyle with a young family. There's so many sports out there that not everything is focused on football. And it just allowed me to sort of go and enjoy playing in a different country. And the first year I was there, we won the league, which is the first time the club had won the league since its inception. So to go on as a player and win the league in your first season and help the team achieve something they'd never achieved was a great achievement for me. And I enjoyed playing out there up until I think 2017, where I sort of retired and I'd already started down the coaching route. And then naturally, the opportunity came for me to coach and develop the young players in the academy and then get the first team job, which was a great start for me in coaching.
And you won the league as a manager then, didn't you? Is that right?
Yeah, so 10 years from winning it as a player. The club had languished at the bottom of the league. Took over the academy, redeveloped it, brought in my assistant Sergio Raimundo, who was somebody that I'd met on the coaching courses, Portuguese coach, fantastic person and coach. And we sort of restructured the academy, started developing players for the first team. And when I got in the first team, within 2 years, we were the number one club in the whole of AFC for academy developed players in the first team. And then we won the league with the youngest team and the lowest budget ever in the A-League competition. So I suppose what we did was something that no one had ever done before, and that was develop a young team taken from the academy and again, first in Asia. AFC for the academy developed players was sort of the moment where we said, wow, that's something that we're really proud of. And then to win the league, and then the team went on and won the league the second year as well as the Asia Cup. And at that point, I'd been headhunted by Hibernian and moved to Scotland.
Did you get to know Ange Postecoglou while you were working in Australia?
So when I played against his teams, and then by the time I started managing there, he'd sort of moved on to Japan and Celtic. And look, he's a keen follower of the A-League, and obviously he saw what I'd done with a really young group of players, which he was really impressed with. And not only that, we brought in some visa players that were, again, within our budget, that we then developed and sold them to the J-League, sold them to different leagues around the world. So I think what we did, he followed that closely, and he was one of the first people to send me a message after we'd won the championship in Australia, and I think that showed sort of the measure of him, and we'd sort of been in touch via text messages up until the moment that I spoke and came to join him at Tottenham.
And that was Ange's decision then, was it, to bring you over rather than the clubs?
Yeah, well, obviously Chris Davies had moved to Birmingham City. And at that moment, there was an opportunity to bring an assistant in. And I spoke to Ange, and all happened quite quickly. And it was just before pre-season started at Tottenham. So, in terms of timing, it was great. And I sort of, knew I was going into, a huge club working in the Premier League and, a team that had Europa League that season. So that would be something new for me as a coach. And again, learning from someone like Ange that's won multiple trophies in multiple countries, which I think is very difficult to do. Not many people have done that.
And I've done an article with Ange before, actually. I think he's pretty unique in bringing together a totally new coaching staff wherever he goes, because you find most managers have at least a couple of assistants they will always take with them, but he makes a deliberate point of not doing that. So what do you think of that approach? Does that work well?
Look, I think it's going to be different for everybody. I think for Ange it's worked really well. I think going into different clubs, he's always taken, one or two people with him. But I mean, you see now some coaches go in and take the whole staff, the medical staff, the physios, the analysts, and ultimately, I think Ange sees that, there is a lot of value in people that understand the club and have worked in the club. But for him to sort of go in and be able to bring in some staff, I think that's important. So I was fortunate that sort of we'd been in touch, he'd followed what I'd done since I'd retired and gone into coaching and managing, and gave me that opportunity to come and assist him. And like I said, he's a unique guy, and to experience what I did last season, working with him and the other staff at the club as well. You meet some great people in football when you're moving around, and I've been fortunate that I've had success in different countries as well. And sort of coming back to England after 15 years, you still see a lot of the people around, and I think probably many would have not known what I've been doing the last 15 years because everybody is so engrossed in the Premier League. All around the world, it's all about the Premier League, and I think there's a massive world out there. There's leagues overseas in Asia, in Europe, that are obviously hugely followed. A lot of passion and some big teams, but obviously, everybody's engrossed in the Premier League. So to come back into the Premier League after being away for so long, bump into a lot of faces that I've not seen for a long time, which was really nice.
You'd come back to Britain originally with Hibs. I think, as you said at the start, it looked like you'd done well there on the face of it. So what happened there? Was it about a year in the end?
Yeah, so look, they sort of headhunted me after I'd won the championship in Australia. I'd sort of rebuilt the team, took pre-season, and I think 5 games into the season, they were bottom of the SPL. They sort of offered me the job. They headhunted me. I think there was a lot of people that wanted the job. I knew it was a big job. I knew it was a team that was in a transition. It needed a full rebuild, and that's sort of one of the big reasons why I took the opportunity. And the team was bottom of the league, rock bottom of the league after 4 or 5 games, and it was the oldest squad in the league. So sort of coming in, I knew exactly what I was coming into. I spoke to the owner and the people at the club, Brian McDermott, who was there at the time, and yeah, look, they were sort of not in a good space, and they also had a lot of players out on loan. They had 20 odd players out on loan that were brought in as part of a development squad that hadn't worked out. Sort of a failed experiment. But look, coming in, I took the challenge on. They were bottom of the SPL. I took them up to 4th in the table, semi-final of the Scottish Cup, and then sort of mid-season there was an Asia Cup and African Nations. We sort of lost half the starting team for 2 months of the season, but we had 5 or 6 academy debuts, 16-year-olds playing in the first team. Wasn't planned, but ultimately, the squad needed a revamp, it needed a rebuild, and look, towards the end of the season, with sort of differences in terms of the recruitment and what we'd agreed on, and ultimately, that's football. I don't leave with any bitterness. We disagreed on a few things, and there was a mid-season buy-in from Bournemouth group, from Black Knight, so there was sort of external issues going on that were well documented. And in the end, we sort of, we parted ways, and that's when the opportunity came up to join Ange. So look, I believe everything happens for a reason. Really enjoyed my time there. Good club, good fans. Obviously working in the SPL and going to Ibrox and Celtic Park, playing against Rangers and Celtic. And look, it's culturally it's different. In terms of the way the teams play. There's still synthetic pitches up in Scotland. Hopefully they're going to sort of move them on, so a lot of challenges up there, but look, some good memories there, and look, the biggest reason I went was to sort of rebuild the team, but we never sort of got the opportunity to do that, but I wish them well, and it's good to see that they've sort of rebuilt since I was there, and going to Tottenham and winning that Europa League was the pathway for me, and like I said, I think everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. And have you stayed in touch with Ange since you both left the club?
Yeah, so we've been in touch every now and then. I think he's obviously been on holiday a lot, which he deserves. But yeah, in terms of the coaching staff, I think, like you said, not only players but as staff, when you win something like we did together and we went through what we did, like, you're always going to have that connection, that family connection, because it's impossible to achieve what we did. And I think people will realise down the line it's not easy to win a European Cup, and under the circumstances that we had. I think it was an amazing achievement. So we still speak every now and then, and who knows what the future holds right now.
Would you assist him again if the opportunity came?
Yeah, look, that's an option moving forward, and I really enjoyed assisting him, and obviously the success we had with the Europa League. So we've sort of been in touch, and no doubt he's had plenty of offers, and we'll catch up at some point soon. But every now and then it's a little message, see how we're getting on, and obviously I've had interest and he's had interest, but I think in the end, who knows, football changes in one day. A week is a long time in football. I think nowadays a day is a long time in football. We'll see what happens, but I'm sure that once this international window's out of the way, I'm sure that there'll be opportunities coming up at some point, and it's just about choosing the right opportunity.
Can he still go on and achieve big things, do you think, in the future of his career?
Yeah, no doubt. I think he's shown that all throughout his whole career, and he's like all of us, like everybody, have setbacks, and I think to achieve what he did last year and the season before, had to finish high in the league to get that Europa League spot as well, and ultimately, there's no doubt he's a manager that's had success in multiple countries, and I don't think there's many that have done that. And he's proven he can manage in the highest league in the world, which is the Premier League. ultimately that's a pinnacle where where everybody wants to get, and not only that, he's a European Cup winner, as a manager in his second season in the Premier League. So no doubt he can go on and achieve things wherever he decides in future.
Superb. Oh, and just the final one about Ange. What are kind of the main lessons you would take from him? Or one thing that really stands out about his leadership that you admire?
I just think everything about it. I think he's really authentic and really honest, and I believe that's a big part of me as well. I think that's why we sort of connected in the first place. But I just think the belief that he gave everybody, and even during the really difficult times when we had a full medical room, we had everybody doubting us, to keep everybody believing. And then as staff, your role is to be an extension of the manager. And again, I've been a manager. I had a fantastic assistant in Sergio, so I understand what being an assistant is about. And ultimately that's supporting the manager, and that's making sure the messages are clear, and everybody's on the same message, and to keep the belief in the most difficult times. I think that's something where he never wavered in his belief, and to come out and say it publicly and back it up, I mean, that's probably going to be the biggest mic drop of all time, no doubt, in many years to come. But yeah, look, I think the players loved him. You saw the outpouring of grief, by the players when he left the club, and you don't see that too often in football. And obviously, to leave after winning the Europa League for sure would have been difficult for some of the players. And we really had a fantastic group of players, and I still keep in touch with quite a lot of them now as well. And it's great to see they've had a good start to the season, and yeah, they've got Champions League football to look forward to this season, and they've seemed to have spent good money in the transfer market as well, and added some real quality to the squad.
What's it like as a staff when someone makes a big statement like that? Because usually people play things down, don't they, to take the pressure off themselves? But he really made that massive statement and put the pressure on. Is that good to have that target to work towards?
Yeah, look, I think as a leader, you have to set your stall out, and he said that right from the start. We're going to win something this season, and even throughout the season, we had some huge results, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, at City, for example, and we know when we had everybody fit and we were strong and healthy, we could compete with everybody, and for sure, as a leader, you have to believe in we're going to win something, and for me, as an assistant and the rest of the staff, we all believed. I genuinely believed that with the group of players we had, once we got everybody back fit, we'd already proved that we could beat the best in the league. And if you can beat the best in the Premier League, then you're going to be able to beat the best in Europe, because the Premier League is the best league in the world. I think that's not many can argue that fact. So yeah, we knew that we just had to work hard and again just keep the belief amongst the group and keep that camaraderie in. Yeah, we had a real family environment, and I think that's the big strength that Ange managed to keep, and that was keep everybody believing. So yeah, I definitely learned a lot from him, but that was probably the biggest lesson, was to keep believing even during the difficult times. Don't ever waver in what you believe, and I think that definitely does go across to the players, because they need the manager to believe in that, because the moment they see that you don't believe it, then it's really hard for them. So yeah, it was a great experience.
And I guess that's quite a good message for everyone, in no matter what they do. If you don't believe, then other people aren't going to believe either. Yeah,
you look at some of the single sports, and you look at tennis and golf, and if you listen to podcasts on these people, it's, again, very single-minded, but, you have to believe, because I think visualisation and manifestation, I believe in that as well. I think if you really believe it and you keep pushing every day, and no matter what happens, the tough days you come in and you just work as hard, as the days when, you've won a game, it's all about keeping them standards, and, the training standards that we had. I mean, training was always high intensity, always high quality. And even when we didn't have loads of players, it became difficult because, you're not spending a lot of time on the training ground. It's more about recovery, because you got 3 games a week, you've got a lot of travel. So then it's about getting around the players, keeping that positive messaging, and that's when the sports psychology side comes in of it. You don't accept negativity, and you don't accept people not believing, and ultimately it's about getting around everybody and keeping that communication, and I think that's really important.
Did you have a sports psychologist at Tottenham?
No, we didn't have one at Tottenham. Obviously Ange's really experienced, and obviously he's not a sports psychologist, but like I said, in terms of what we spoke about, believing that you can win. But I've worked with sports psychologists before. I used one in Australia as well, and I think they can be really powerful. But again, it's about getting the right person the right fit for the environment, because ultimately the players have to buy into it. They have to believe in the people that you surround yourself with. So yeah, I think that's something that is in sport a lot now, in every sport around the world, for the things that I mentioned, because you have such an outside influence now from social media and that's one example. So you have to keep the players focused and provide them that support, because there's a lot of distractions.
Definitely. Just a final question: what are your ambitions for your career going forwards?
Look, for me, it's about just taking the next step as it comes. And I've been a manager. I've had success in a foreign country. I've managed in the SPL, and I've now assisted in the Premier League and been part of winning the Europa League. So yeah, I suppose it's looking at every option. I've had a couple of offers since leaving Tottenham, but I didn't feel like they were right for me. So ultimately, it's about waiting for the right opportunity and the right project, one that I think I can really impact, and hopefully that won't be too long away. But for now, just continue watching football, whether it's Premier League, Championship, international football, because I think when you're in at a club, it's very hard to be watching everything else. You're fully focused on what you're doing and preparing the next session and preparing the players. So yeah, I've just sort of taken the opportunity to go out and to go and educate myself a little bit more and make sure when that opportunity comes, no matter what that is, if I feel it's right for me and the family, then yeah, I'm really excited for what's coming in future.
Thank you for listening to the Training Ground Guru podcast in association with Teamworks Intelligence. We'll be back next month with another episode.